I'm in Leeds with the Prime Minister, Tonie Blair. Prime Minister, is there anything you'd like to apologise for?
Well, if you want me to apologise for the war in Iraq, I'm afraid I can't say that I'm sorry we removed Saddam, no.
Let's look at Iraq. When you told Parliament that the intelligence was extensive, detailed and authoritative, that wasn't true, was it?
No, it was true. There was no doubt about...
It wasn't extensive, it wasn't detailed and it wasn't authoritative.
I'm sorry, it was. And the great thing about this now, for any member of the public, is that thanks to the Butler report, remember we've had 4 separate inquiries into whether this intelligence was misused or not. Each of them come to the same conclusion. And people can actually go and look on the website and they can go and study the Joint Intelligence Committee reports that I got and see the intelligence that was given to us.
OK, but you know, don't you, that just 2 weeks before you made that statement, the Joint Intelligence Committee said that intelligence remains limited.
Of course, intelligence always is limited, but
well,
they also
therefore it's not extensive, detailed and authoritative, is it?
I'm sorry, their judgment was absolutely clear. Look, the one thing you can do is go and read it. It said that Saddam Hussein had chemical and biological weapons, that he could manufacture new stocks of VX and sarin agent within months of doing so, that he could use those weapons against not just military targets but strategic targets. You can go and read it.
They said it was limited. You said it was extensive, detailed and authoritative.
They also made it clear that there was extensive intelligence about Saddam. They said, however, of course it's necessarily limited. Intelligence always is.
So was the JIC, the Joint Intelligence Committee report, wrong?
No, they weren't wrong in what they reported at the time. They were absolutely right. But later it transpired that some, not all, of that intelligence was wrong. But the decision I had to take at the time was whether, as a result of that intelligence, we could conclude Saddam was in breach of United Nations resolutions, and I concluded he was, and I may say the evidence is that he indeed was in breach of UN resolutions.
So when you wrote in the foreword to the dossier that the threat from Saddam was serious and current, it wasn't, and indeed your own Chief of Staff, Jonathan Powell, had said that the dossier did nothing to demonstrate a threat.
No, I'm sorry, the evidence that we presented was absolutely clearly set out in the Joint Intelligence Committee reports. You've had 4 inquiries into this. We subjected ourselves as a government, me as a Prime Minister, to a more extensive inquiry than any government's ever given. And what I'd simply ask people to do, instead of continually attacking my integrity over Iraq, I've never disrespected people who've taken a different point of view. But I had to take a decision in the best interests of the country. I took that decision. I cannot, I'm afraid, apologise for having taken it. I believe still it was the right thing to do. I understand why people disagree. Despite the fact there were no
weapons of mass destruction, and
yes,
you told us
because
there were.
The legal case was the breach of United Nations resolutions. The evidence from the Iraq Survey Group is that he was indeed in breach of UN resolutions. And incidentally, it wasn't just us in Britain that concluded. Now, hang on a minute. It wasn't just us in Britain that concluded he had WMD. The entire United Nations concluded that, which is why they passed Resolution 1441.
Did you see the Foreign Office legal advice which said that military action against Iraq would be illegal without a further UN resolution?
No, I had the Attorney General's advice to guide me. But again, this thing has been built into...
Did you see? You didn't see that Foreign Office advice saying that an invasion would be illegal without a second UN resolution?
No, because I had the Attorney General's advice.
You didn't see it?
Yes, I didn't see it, but I had the Attorney General's advice. And the Attorney General made it absolutely clear that, provided that we could show that there were breaches of the United Nations resolutions.
The Attorney General is a political appointment, Prime Minister. Shouldn't you have seen the Foreign Office legal advice?
But the Attorney General's advice is the advice he gives us as the law officer. He acts in an independent way in doing that.
Do you accept any responsibility at all for the death of Dr. David Kelly?
It was a terrible, terrible thing to have happened. I don't believe we had any option, however, but to disclose his name, because I think had we failed to do so, that would have been seen as attempting to conceal something from the committee that was looking into this at the time. And again,
do you accept any responsibility at all?
I've said what I've said, and I feel desperately sorry for his family and indeed for the terrible ordeal that they were put through. But as I said at the time, and again, this has been gone into time and time again, if we had concealed the fact, because this whole row was about the information that, as you know, we've been over this many, many times, had been given to the BBC reporter, he had then come forward and said to his superiors, this is me, I think it's me who's responsible for having given this story. There was a Foreign Affairs Select Committee report going on at the time. I think if we'd concealed that from people, we would have been subject for a different, to a different type of allegation.
The question is you don't accept any responsibility.
It's not a question of not accepting responsibility. It is a question of simply explaining the circumstances.
It's a question to which you could give a yes or no answer.
Yeah, but it's maybe not a question you need to give a yes or no answer to.
You keep referring to these inquiries. The inquiry that you set up under Lord Butler concluded that what went wrong there was partly the consequence of your style of government, so-called sofa government. Will your next government, if you have one, be any different?
I don't run a sofa style of government. There were over 20 cabinet discussions of the Iraq war.
Lord Butler said, we are concerned that the informality and circumscribed character of the government's procedures, which we saw in the context of policy making towards Iraq, risks reducing the scope for informed collective political judgment. Are we going to see a different style of government in future if you are in government?
We have a government that involves people fully. I'm sorry, I don't accept that we did not discuss Iraq in a proper way.
How many times did the Ministerial Defence and Overseas Policy Committee meet in the run-up to war?
It didn't have to meet the whole...
It didn't meet at all, did it?
Well, hang on, it didn't have to meet, Jeremy, because we had an ad hoc committee of ministers that were meeting virtually daily at points.
And that is precisely what Lord Butler criticised.
No, he doesn't criticise that, actually. That's completely different from the so-called sofa style of government. But look, I want to make this point to you, because you can go on over and over and over about these events that have happened. In the end, I had a decision to make. Back in March 2003, we had 250,000 UK and US troops down there. We had Saddam not in compliance with UN resolutions. I tried desperately hard to get a second UN resolution. I couldn't get one. Now, I had a decision to make. I had a decision to make as to whether to leave Saddam there in breach of UN resolutions and end up in a situation with the international community humiliated, him emboldened, or to remove him. I decided to remove him. Now, you can go through these issues about my integrity, my character, the legal advice, because the legal advice, actually, the legal issue is exactly the same as the political issue, or you can accept that in the end, a decision had to be taken. There was no middle way. There was no fence to sit on. I took that decision. Now, I know people strongly disagree with it. I'm sorry, in the end, I had to take the decision as Prime Minister that I thought was right for the country, and I did so.
The problem is, Prime Minister, that the next time the Joint Intelligence Committee come to you and say we have extensive authoritative intelligence of a threat or possible threat to this country, we urge preemptive action, you won't be able to sell it to the public.
Well, let's wait and see if that ever happens, and I hope it never does. But I think that people, actually, when they look at this, despite all the stuff, because continually this argument is conducted...
Why should they believe you again?
Because in the end, people have got to make a judgment about this. This was not an easy decision to take. It was a hard decision.
Yes.
I took the decision I thought was right. And if I had not taken that decision, then what? You'd have Saddam Hussein and his sons still running Iraq. You wouldn't have 8 million Iraqis going out voting at the polls. You wouldn't have change spreading across the Middle East as it is. There has been a lot that has happened on the other side of the argument that just occasionally we should also pay attention to.
Although those, of course, are not the grounds on which you told us we should go to war at the time.
The grounds were the legal case was breaches of UN resolutions. He was in breach of UN resolutions. But again, if I may say, this again has been completely rewritten afterwards. I spoke about the regime and the nature of the regime continually, because what I said to people was, this is a difficult situation, but let us, if we have to remove him with a clear conscience, because this is a man responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths.
This matters also, Prime Minister, because during your time in office, you have committed British forces to battle on 5 separate occasions. On past form, we can expect, if you're returned to Downing Street, they might be committed another couple of times in another Blair government. You haven't given George Bush any undertakings about anywhere else in the world, have you?
I haven't given him any undertakings about anywhere, and I don't make the decisions according to what the President of the United States might want. I make it according to what I think are in the interests of this country.